Hello and good day, everybody. We're here today to look at the SQL application drill down in a little more detail. My name is Rich Galeba. I'm a principal analyst on the support team, development and support. I've been with the company for almost 20 years, and in that time, you may have called in and talked to me on support. Else, if you call in the future, I'll possibly be there to help you out. We have a great team and we're all on board to help you work with SQL and some of its functionality. One of the things we want to look at, of course, today is the drill down applications. But before that, a little housekeeping about today's session. If you have questions during the presentation, please hold those until the end, and I will send them to an email address that I'll give you. It'll be support.sql@fortra.com. I'll remind you of that later. And we'll do our best to address your questions after the seminar is over. I don't have access to chat, so I won't be monitoring that during the presentation. We're just going to be in with the presentation, and then we'll finish the meeting. And then any follow-up questions are through email. We have a great education session planned. Before we do, I wanted to touch on some of the services that are also available to our SQL clients. Our training classes really help you to get the most out of SQL. A technical background is not required. And we have scheduled classes and on-demand training. We can even customize class agendas to meet your unique needs. Maybe you don't need training, but you could use a mentor, a couple hours of some detailed look. These one-on-one or small group sessions are typically conducted over your system with your data. And the result really is usable information and the strengthening of your SQL skills. Consulting is available also. We can help plan, assess, develop, and implement your data access and BI projects. Another area where we can help is with install and upgrades. We commonly have folks that'll get us on standby for a couple hours during an upgrade, and we're there to monitor and assist that. And lastly, if you're looking to still use if you are still using multiple tools to retrieve data, we can help you consolidate that work within SQL with our migration services. Please feel free to reach out to your sales rep or call support if you would like additional information about these services. Now on to today. Today's agenda is what are applications. We're going to go through each of these bullet points in detail, so we'll expand on that as we move forward. We'll look at how the pieces of an application are put together. Applications do come in a couple different flavors, and you're going to see that as we move forward. Creation of an application is easy. We've got a wizard process. Their applications are deployed through Windows Viewpoint. Another way to use the drill down is through a browser with our web interface. We'll follow up with some miscellaneous tips and then the wrap up at the end. Now you're going to use Sequel Viewpoint to create views with your Windows client. And then when you deploy the drill down, you're either going to use Viewpoint or the SQL web interface. We have a mention at the bottom there about repository mode. It's a different deployment strategy that's available. And if you're in that mode, there are special considerations that we should be aware of when working with applications. So what is an application? It's a method of drilling down or drilling through your data. Start with the beginning view, you go into lower level detailed views. It's a tool that you own. You define the paths and the logic that are used to link views together. This helps to leverage your skills. You really don't, with all due respect to programmers, you don't have to be a programmer to put these views together and then have them deployed through Viewpoint or the web interface. So we'll show you how to build these applications. The process is dynamic, but of course with the wizard, it guides you through the steps necessary to create an application. And they're fairly easy to use and evolve as your needs change. So moving forward, you may need to make modifications. Shouldn't be too difficult to do that. And then finally, we're not limited to just IBM data. What we mean by that Your view definitions retrieve data from physical files on the IBMI. However, you may have remote database connections to Windows servers or an Oracle database, some other remote database connection, and those can be tied in. Those types of views that retrieve data from external databases can be tied into the drill down process. You're not limited to just the IBM data. So, anatomy of a drill down application. What are the pieces that make it up? When I said there's different flavors, there's really two different ways we could look at this drill down functionality. We can create what's called an implied link for our data, or we could use an explicit link for data. Let me put this laser pointer on here. So there's a difference between, and these both drill down, but they deploy slightly different. So let's look at what those differences are. When you were implying drill down links, they're easier to create. One of the things that makes it possible is that a view has a variable on it that matches a field name that we want to pass to that view. The descriptions that are up here in the title bar are based on the object names. You can't override that. You're limited to views and host tables, and when you create these drill down applications. And when you're in the application, you'll see a dashed line between the two objects. So we decided we want to use two views here. One is called begin, and the other one is called DD or the head. So you can imagine that the first one is going to show customer master information, and then the second one is going to show open orders for the customer. So that's going to be the process here. In this begin view, we have a field called CUSNO for customer number. That happens to match a variable called CUSNO ampersand CUSNO in our second level view. So the second level view is prompted and it's expecting some kind of input at runtime. That input's provided by the previous view that's being displayed. Now that's it. So that's an app. If you have a view that matches a variable and you put these into an application, you need to save the application and it's ready to go. But somewhat limited because you can only run that in Sequel Viewpoint. Now, if we take that a step further and build what's called an explicit drill down, there's a little bit of more work to do, and that's in a way of creating a command string to run your second level view. But this ability to create your own command string to run the view gives you a little more flexibility where your variable name does not have to match the field name that's being passed. We can customize the description that appears in the title bar when the view results are displayed. We could use any SQL object in the option file. We use what's called an option file when we're building explicit views. That option file contains commands. And so we're not only limited to the display command, but we could use the execute command to output your results, maybe to an email, right click, email results, and then or print it out with a print command. And when you build these options, then what happens is we create a relationship between two views, but there's a solid line between them. And that's the kind of the subtle difference when you're working with options. You see a solid line, you know you have what's called an option file entry that's going to be used to display second level view. And here are those components in more detail. So we have view one that shows the customers. This is our starting point for the application. So we're going to specify that whenever we run this app, this is our first view that appears. This view contains columns of data, and one of those columns is the customer number. And in this case, it's a view. It could be a table too, and we'll talk about that in the end. So that's all we have here. So it's a good thing to think ahead of time what your starting view is, and then what level of detail you want to go into as you create these drill downs. So in this case, we have a starting view that shows some columns, one being the customer number. The next component would be an option, and in the option file that contains a command to run this next view, the next step. And the command has parameters that will identify what view you want to run at the next step, what column value should be passed to the next step. So that, in other words, the field name doesn't have to match the variable name in the second level view. So we're going to prompt and receive that value through the command string, along with other path descriptions as far as distribution of the object, and title text title, which is this information that appears in the information bar. And in this case, it's showing, the description: open orders for NBC company. And then view 2 is our orders. Right, so this is our detail. We started out with a customer list, passed that customer number to our order file, and then we pull up the open orders. Now from here, we can go orders to order line detail, and then maybe from order line detail over to inventory or costing information. So as long as you have these where clauses at the next level view, and it's why it's a good idea to kind of lay out how you want your data to flow and what you're going to need to go from one to the other. You build those views, and then the where clause has the variable it's going to accept the input from the previous view. But what is that option? So remember, 2 flavors. Option file method, explicit join, and implied, where the field name just matches. So we're done with the implied. We've already built that. You have 2 views. One view has a field name called customer that's displayed. Next view has a where clause that says where, orders by equal customer. But with the option file, we build commands. And in this instance, we'll take a look at that option command and how it appears. So we have the starting view called customer listing. And when we look at the SQL statement, you'll see that we have a column called customer. We've named it CUS hashtag. So now that's an override to the field name. That's this first column, customer number, but it's called CUS hashtag. Then the name, type, region, so on. That's a pretty simple SQL statement. So what we want to do is, in our option file now, create a command that specifies that we want to display results from a view called order header. That's our next level down. The order header now commands has some parameters for the text to display when the results appear. And in this case, we're going to take the customer name and place that into the title of the title bar that appears, or wherever else the text. You'll see this text being used for output on email attachments, maybe PDF file outputs. But that's the identification there. And then finally, the set var. This is an important command when you have a view that's prompted and you want to automate the prompted view through a command. You got to use what's called set var to say, okay, when we run this view, you have a variable in it. Here's the value that we want to use. And you'll notice this set var has a variable name in it from our previous view, and it matches this customer number name, CUS hashtag. And so that's how we're identifying. When the names don't match, of course, we didn't have to rename this, and it could have been matched and been an application. But in our example here, we renamed it. And when the names don't match, then when the set var is defined, we'll specify which column name to use for that input value. So that's our second level view. You'll see the SQL statement, and then again, the variable string. So that's kind of how it's put together. Hope that makes sense. Again, any follow-up, we'll have an email address you'll be able to send questions to. Well, now we'll move on to some of the setup details of our applications. So as I mentioned in our previous topic, before you start, it's a good idea to kind of have a layout or a flow of the views that you want to tie together. And the most important one will be your starting object, where you want to start this process and then drill down through, and your destination objects. Make sure your destination object has an input for a variable that is going to be received from the starting view. Those are kind of things you might want to lay out, right? And specify, okay, here's some field names in this view. Here's our variable names that the field is going to satisfy when we run that next level view. And the idea is what the field name doesn't match, no problem. We'll build an option record. If the field names match, then you have an easier way of building an application where just the names match. So remember, I mentioned something called an option file, and every user that signs into SQL has an option file associated to their user profile. And so if you build an option, you put it in an option file and it's not working for a user, there's a good chance that we got to take a look at how that user is set up. But it's specific, and you can have many option files. Each option file is multi-membered. And this might be a good way to segment out which user group can use a set of options based on the option file that's associated with their profile. So it's just a file. We generally suggest not to place it in the SQL library. If you do, that'll get refreshed in your next update. So don't put it in the production library, but place it into one of your permanent live that you use for views or reports. You could have multiple option files in the same file, meaning it is multi-membered. So I could take it down to that level of detail. So you've identified this option file that's hanging out there. It's got nothing in it yet. We haven't populated it. It's associated with the user profile, and we're going to use it for drill down. Now we're going to look at the steps that the application wizard takes you through. So now we're back on the application object, and we're building an application object through the Sequel Viewpoint interface. And it presents 4 steps in the wizard process. The first one is a description. Step 2, you specify which option file you're using. And if it doesn't exist, you can create it on this step. Step 3 identifies which objects you want to place into this workspace. So we're creating this application workspace, and it will have several objects in them. One of those objects will be the beginning object. So the last step of the wizard is to specify what your starting object is. In this case, it's DD begin. But it's a 4-step process. You could suppress that once you become expert. You start using this enough, you don't have to go through the wizard, but here's what it looks like. Here's what that workspace looks like when we're building applications. And here are 2 examples. One is where we have on the right side where we have the implied links with a dashed line, which means that DD ord head had a matching field in the DD begin view. So it was able to create that link, and then ord line has a matching variable input to a field that's in the order header display. That imply now we could just do a file save and you're done. You could run that application as soon as you save it from Viewpoint. But the applications don't work in a web interface. So that's why we talk about the option file. The option file gives us a little more control and a little more the ability to use it now, not only in Viewpoint, but also in the web interface. When we pick views that don't have matching field variable names, they'll end up in the list at the bottom of the work area, and we'll have to manually create the relationship between these 2 files by building an option file entry. Here, an option file entry is not created either, right? So there's nothing behind the scenes. This is an application. You save it, and it's saved as a SQL type application. When we build an option file, so we don't even write records to the option file here again. That's kind of a standalone object. But when we use the option file, when we have access to the option file, we build that entry, we'll use the same workspace. And again, you'll see the slight differences that appear when you display one or the other. Now now focusing on the option filed entry. So remember, again, we built that previous example on the right-hand side. This is implied, everything matched up, but that's not always the perfect world. So we might have to add an option. It's a very good chance you're going to need to add an option. And here's what the option file edit panel looks like. You'll see that there's a command defined. And this is the display command. That's what you use to display results. We're specifying the view. We're specifying text to appear with that view, and then the variable that's being passed in. So again, when you're building an option file entry, you have a chance to override the text that appears. And if we look at the bottom, it's that same option file entry, but we've enhanced it, right? Now enhanced it, we've changed it because now we know that the variable name is ampersand CUS. Remember, in that original view, customer number was renamed, CUSNO was renamed to CUS. So we're identifying that in this bottom part where we've improved the syntax. This would not have worked because there was no field called CUSNO and DD ORD had X. So this is a slightly different view, has an X at the end. And the only difference is the customer number or name of that field was changed. And now we're forced to put an entry in because we don't have these matching variables. So that's what an option entry looks like. The good part is Sequel Viewpoint will build most of the command string, and you just have to go back and tweak the areas that are necessary. So with that, let me make sure. Yeah, we're going to go into creating an application. Let me switch over to Viewpoint. So the first thing I'm going to do is create an implied application. Remember I said that application is a type. So if we go down to SQL applications, it's SQL APP, you see that I have some already created. If we go to SQL EX, this is our sample library. You should see some created there also. But what I want to do now is I want to build a new application. So I'm going to go up, I can either go to the new tab, select application here, or we can go to new drop down list box, select the application here. And here's that workspace that appears along with the wizard. Excuse me. So we're going to give this a description. We'll call this a drill demo 1. We'll click next. Now remember I talked about that option file. I know my profile is linked to an option file called opt file in a library called SQL. Yes, I know we're violating our rule, but I don't care if it gets refreshed when we do an update because I build these on the fly, for our class purposes. There's a member called DD how to. So this is, again, a good way to manage these option record entries so only specific users might have them available when they're working. And if you're building option drill down and the end person cannot see that option, then it's probably because of how their defaults are set up. So this is step 3. Step 2. Step 3 now is where we browse for the objects that we want to include. And I'm going to go ahead and include our beginning, DD begin view. And then I'm going to take the order header. Again, it's a good place to consider what you want to tie together, build those views, and then have them available. And in this case, we're picking 3 views. We're going to go from the order customer master to the orders by customer to the line item by order. We already built those views and we've selected them. Now we go next. And the final step of the wizard is to add a request to identify which object is the starting object. And if it doesn't happen to be, if you don't see the starting object appear here, you could reselect that object and change that on the fly. So, but we want to use DD begin, and then we'll finish that. So if everything's working properly, we should see this application go through and review those views and tie them together into our workspace. You'll see the dashed line. Now, a good way to validate this is to say, okay, DD ord head, if I right click on that, what variables are we using in that view? Scooch this over to the middle a little bit. And you'll see that the variable name is ampersand CUSNO. That's the variable that this view is expecting when it's run. It's a prompted view. So let's look at the fields that DD begin provide, and you'll see CUSNO is right at the top of the list. So field name matched the variable name in our second view. And you can see the same thing between 2 and 3. So we'll say in view number 3, what variable is that view expecting? In this case, it's order number, ampersand ORDNO. And then we can say, okay, what fields are being displayed? You can see ORDNO. Again, that's the magic sauce that links these together. Now we can go file, save, and I'll go ahead and we'll save this. I've got a personal library. We'll put it, no, maybe, no, you know what? Sorry about this. We'll put it in a different library here. SEQ_E train. All right. So this is our application, and I'll call this RG App 1 in the library called SEQ train. All right. So now this object is saved. Our RG App 1 saved. We'll exit the application builder, go to our existing views or our existing tab, go to the SEQ train library. We'll refresh the list. And here's that RG app that we just created. Now, when I double click on that, we see that the starting view displays and we see customer information. And now if we right click on here, we could do a drill to orders for a customer. So now if there were more than one view linking from the starting view, so right now we only have one, you could have 3 or 4 views at the next level, you would see 3 or 4 views down this list. And now, but that's the only option available. So I did a right click, drill to, now I see open orders for this customer. There were 6 open orders. Now we could pick an order row and we could drill to the line item detail. Line item count says 5 here, so I would expect 5 rows to appear. So that's our drill down application. The only drawback here is you can't run applications through the web interface, but you could if you're deploying in Viewpoint, no problem. And green screen. So this does go back to green screen. If you're still using green screen as a display presentation, we can create option entries that will drill down to the next level. So that's what that option file came from. It came from green screen. And it still supports that. So if you want to need more information on that, send an email after class. We certainly can provide more information, but it's pretty automatic. Once it's still working with the option file though. All right, so we built an application and that drills down as expected. Now I think, we're going to kind of combine the end user experience. Let me now go back and we're going to build another application that uses the explicit link and the option file. So let's see, the best way to do this is we're going to go new. We'll use the application builder. So we're going to say new application. We're going to call this RG Drilldown 2. Here again, the all-important option file that's associated with my profile. And we're going to keep that as is. We haven't, in that previous example, we didn't write anything to the option file. We didn't even use it, but here we will. So now step 3, I've got to pick 2 different views, but for this example, SEQ_E train, got a modified view so that they don't match. And we call that, DD begin X and DD order header X. So I'm going to pick these two views, slightly different than our previous, same information, but just slightly built slightly differently. Our beginning view is going to be begin X, and we'll go finish. And we didn't get the objects to appear on the flow in the workspace. So they didn't. There was no assumed linkage between the two based on the field name and variable name, and it would be good. We can analyze that by right-clicking on our second level view here that's prompted and say, okay, what variable name is being used here? How come they didn't link up? It says, well, our customer number is actually &CUSNO. Okay, that makes sense. Now, what's happening at our beginning view, we're going to show the fields, and you'll see that there is no CUSNO, but there is a renamed field or a field named CUS, which means that in order to link these together, we need to tie the field result called CUS to the variable name called &CUSNO. And we got to put that in the option file. So the easiest way to do that is to pick the second view that we want to drill to. I'm going to select the option to the menu option to create an option. So right click on that second level view, create option. And here we're going to see the command that's being used, display. And you'll see that we're going to modify, because we create this, we're going to modify this and say, and when you display this, use the customer number. And in this case, because it's a quoted string, we need 2 ampersands. That's an advanced, some of you may be aware of that. So we'll need 2 ampersands because we're in a quoted string, and I would take that customer number and put it in the title bar. And we also, and more importantly, we want to pass it down to the variable called cusno in our second level view. It's the variable name and the looking at the order header file based on the customer number being displayed from the first view. So we're creating the option entry. We're writing it to a file called opt file member dd how to. That's tied to my profile, and the command is displayed. Now, because it's an option file, and we can run any other type of command too. Again, you could do an execute command in here. You could do a report command. You could do a print command. You can even run PC objects. We could do a PC DOS-like command to pull that in there. Seen some folks do that. So but that's only when you're using the option file. That won't happen through the application. All right, so we've got this tweak. There's a couple option IDs, parameters at the bottom. This goes back to green screen, and that would be the option you use on a row to run this next level view. Filter is a way to limit which options appear to the user based on the view name. So I could say only views with DD ORD, with DD, started with DD, can display this option. So it's another way of limiting and controlling how these drill downs work from user to user. And you can, again, force that drill down only to a specific view or a partial view name. In this case, anything that begins with DD can run this. We're going to leave that blank. Click OK. So behind the scenes, we're writing this entry out, and you'll notice that now we've got 2 objects in the window, solid line. And the important thing, the interesting thing is here, I don't have to save this as an application anymore, because when I run this view, it's going to know that, hey, based on your option file, I could run these other views behind the scenes. It doesn't need the application object to tie everything together. We did that through the option file. So just to review the option file, we go up to the option file menu, select which one I want to select, edit, and you'll see that that command appears in this list. In deployment, you may see rows and rows of commands based again on the types of drill down complexity you have and what you're doing. But this is done. I'm not going to save it, but we're going to run DD begin X. I'm just going to exit out of here without saving. Now I go find the view that we just put. And again, if we did this right correctly, when I run DD begin X, yep, I see that at the top of the screen, there's this drill down options icon, and it shows me orders for customer. But that's the same as right-clicking on a line. So I could right-click on any row and see open orders for that customer. So we'll take this first customer, right-click, show open orders. And there's our 6 open orders. Now, remember, we didn't have any order to line details. So if I right-click, there's no drill down. It's showing me just a single record. I don't know if you've ever seen that. When you double-click on a row, it's not drill down enabled. You just toggle from single to double. But in any case, now you'll see we have a result that shows open orders for customer number, and then the results from that. So let's pick one more. I don't know if Maple Leaf Company has any orders. Well, let's take a look. And yes, one line. And so get drill down through the option file. And that's a subtle difference in how the two work. Now that create demo is also part of the next slide where we were the end user experience. I think the only thing we could describe here is similar to what you've seen is when you're in the Windows or browser, you could use this drill down functionality when you have an option entry. If you have just the application, you can run it only in Viewpoint. So what does that look like? So you've got a view that we're picking called DYCAP2 customer listing. And then we see orders for customer. We pick that and we get the next row. If you're in the web interface, it's a little different in that when the results are displayed, you see this blue dot, blue button in the first column with the down arrow. And that's your drill down. It's your right click drill down. And then you can see we've got more options go to the next level from this view. You can see the tab with the name also. And so we're looking now at the end user requirements. And as I keep mentioning, Windows with Viewpoint requires a profile and a password, requires Viewpoint, and IBM Access Client Solution. So you need those components. That's a typical install for Viewpoint anyway. So if you got Viewpoint on your desktop and you build an application, you can run that all day through Viewpoint. Either application or an option entry, right? So option file entry, I think, is a little more controlled, a little more visibility to how the thing is tying, these views are tying together. And I would say my preferred best practice would be to build option file entries. So now you can run option file entries through Viewpoint or the web interface. And if you do it through the web interface, of course, you could have secure sign-on and browser support, and basically have SQL web interface installed in order to enable this. And remember, with options, you don't only have to go to a second level view, you can go to a second level action. So here's a list of our customer, here's our customer with 5 orders. Okay, right click. Now email, an order summary sheet that shows those 5 open orders right from that result. A lot of different possibilities. And you folks are a lot better at the creativity than I am. I've seen some very interesting uses of our tool. All right, so I've demonstrated that. So you've seen the option file creation. You've seen the application creation. We created an app, and I called it Drill Demo 1. And then we also we put that in Rich G. So we have a recent that'll show me. So here's my Rich G. So here's my recent app. And again, we double click on that. This application SQL app would not be available in the web interface. And now you can right click, drill to, orders for our customer. get that detail. So that's the end user experience. You've seen that a few times. Hopefully, again, if you have any questions, you can follow up with a email. Now, to summarize, here's some miscellaneous best tips. You could drill down from a view, as you've seen. We could also drill down from a host table. If we drill down from a host table, we're going to use any of the dimension values. You're not going to use categories going across. You're not going to use what we call column fields. So in this case, we could pull in the product line, the year, or the month to the next level. So that's a table as your starting view. Sometimes, and here's one of the keys. I don't know if you caught on, but when you're using the drill down, you have to display the column in the view you're coming from, right? So you can't hide that information. It's got to be displayed in order to pass it on to the next level. So there might be instances where you just don't have a field that's going to display the variable inputs you want. And a good example of that might be a start and an end date. So what we suggest we do is we create two columns that capture your variable input so that they can be passed to the next level. Now, if we sat long and thought about it, there might be different ways of handling this behind the scenes, but this is the most visible. So this is what it's required. Can we put some of this behind the scenes, maybe in a file or an LDA? Maybe. I think I've seen some solutions, but that gets a little complex. The point, maybe if our first view, we're going to sort all records by, well, never mind. We won't even go here. But here we're start and end date are required so that when we go from our first level view to our second level, we're still going to need that date range to get the requested items. The point is the values that we need are not being displayed naturally out of a field. So we're going to capture that input by creating derived fields that contain the start and end date so they can be passed to the next level view. And that's how it looks in detail. So we have a variable called start and then another one called end. They're both date types. And then in the viewpoint expression, we've got, here's that double quoted start, double quoted end variable. So at runtime, your input will be captured and displayed as columns. And the alternate field name will be used in the set var alt in blue. So the alt field name, which we could see right here, start date and end date. So that's what we're using when we go down to the next level. Whatever you have specified in alt name is an override to your field name. And so if I had a field called XYZ and I didn't have an alt name, then XYZ is a field that I'm passing. But if I assigned alt name ABC to that field, now I would have to reference ABC as the field that's being passed. So alt name is is an override to your default field name. And so what we're showing here in the last capture is your start and end dates appear in each view result. Again, aesthetically, some that may be too much, but again, it's kind of the way it works, and a value has to be displayed. If it's really necessary, pretty sure I have an article with the way to hide all those behind the scenes, but it obviously adds a little more complexity to the design process. We're all about the easy, making it easy to do. Okay, so there we left off. Prompts start. If here's another tip. If you're in the option wizard, remember the option or the application wizard, we were able to identify the option file and work with it. And the only point here is if the new or create option doesn't appear, then you just got to work through the option file, select open, and then pick an option file with a new name. And then you'll see the create option appear. So it kind of happens after you define what you're looking for. If it doesn't appear, then you have this create option. Or you can right click on that object, DD or X, and use a create option, just like I did. right? So right click, create option, and that'll set up the panel for input on the option entry. All right, a couple more minutes here. On the summary, we can retrieve data from multiple servers, right? So you should be aware that Sequel Viewpoint and Sequel can attach to remote databases like an MS SQL server or Oracle database. If that's the case, you could still use those views in this drill down process, right? It doesn't matter. It's still IBM centric. You're still building an application or an option file entry. You're still running a user space object that then connects to the remote database. So no problem connecting to remote servers. And then some repository mode considerations. I don't want to get into this too deeply, but if you're using repository mode, you're aware of it. There are two parts. There's a repository name that ties back to the object name. We've got to be aware of how those are identified in repository mode. Again, something for additional follow-on that's always available to you. So to conclude today, then, you've seen how options are defined, the components of the application, namely the application itself and the adding the view objects, and then the implied versus explicit. Right, and the explicit requires an option file entry, and then refining that option, the display to the end user through Viewpoint, and we do a web interface that's out there, and we talked about some of the miscellaneous topics you'll see. So, as I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, any follow-on questions that you want to ask from this session, feel free to write an email to support.sequel@fortra.com. You can call us at our regular number. We don't have it on the list here. It's 952-933-0609. And we'll be sure to follow up with those. And one more note is that we do have live training sessions every month that cover Viewpoint basics. And every other month we do an enhanced or a beyond the basics type of class. So level 1 every month, level 2 every other month. Those are public and scheduled. If you're taking the basics class, we talk about database concepts, record filtering, just building an SQL and then touching up that view. Whereas level 2 gets into a little more of the processes available. Training information are located at this website. This is recorded. This will also be sent out to you. And let's see, I think I had this linked at some point where I could click on it. But no, not letting me. No, but Fortra.com resources training. And then there's a nice list of SQL training sessions that are available off that page. I thought I built in a link here, but it got me. So thanks for your time. And it will be available if you have any additional questions. I'm going to end this meeting now. And again, I appreciate your time and attention this morning. So long.